and always to you are King. Bless and let there be love in our home, the marriage experience ordained by you alone. The marriage experience. The marriage experience ordained by you alone.
Welcome to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos, where they explore what it means to cultivate a God-centric marriage by delivering realistic and biblical wisdom, pointers, and insights from couples and individuals on the marriage journey. Join them today as they share some insights. Enjoy.
Good evening, Marriage Experience family, and an exceptionally warm welcome to today's episode. We're always glad you're joining us, ready for a time of real couples, real conversations, and real life.
Oh, yes, we're very excited to have you with us. Whether you're here intentionally or you just happen to land on this stream while surfing, we're happy to have you with us. Here, we don't believe in coincidences because this might just be the encouragement that you need today.
And if this is your very first time joining the Marriage Experience, we welcome you. Also, as we say, pull up your chair, settle in, open your heart, and let's dive into today's conversation. It just might shift the way you understand yourself and the way you show up for your spouse and your family this week.
So true. We're passionate about marriage and see it as one of God's most incredible gifts, but we also know that happily ever afters aren't actually automatic. We build with intentionality, we build with patience, we build with hearts that stay in line with God's word.
Indeed. And our heart is to give you a foundation rooted in scripture, coupled with practical tools you can actually use. And we keep it honest and real, yet always leaving room for grace, because come to face it, all of us are work in progress and learning how to love better.
True.
So stay with us and we'll continue after the break.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakunle and Bosade Santos.
So last week we spent some time talking about how couples continue managing and changing within marriage, how life, how seasons, how responsibilities and time quietly shape who we are and who become over the years. And I think those conversations are important because marriage isn't static. You're not just learning who someone was when you met them. You are continually living alongside who they're actually becoming. But after conversations like that, it can sometimes, sound as though marriage is always serious, always reflective, always deeply emotional. When actually a huge part of married life is much more ordinary than that. And honestly, sometimes it actually is funnier than that as well.
Absolutely. And most of life together happens in routines, interruptions, tired evenings, repeated habits, small misunderstandings, and all this little, the strange little things that couples slowly learn about each other over time. And the funny part of it is the ordinary moments often become the most memorable parts that later on, not because they looked important at the time, but because they quietly became part of your shared life together. Talk about trying to record today's episode. It's just been a very, very funny moment with us, but here we are. We're forging ahead. And today we want to stay in this, in this space for a little bit. That's in the everyday reality of marriage. And we want to look at the familiar moments, the small frustrations, the funny patterns, the stories that only make sense once you've actually lived life together for a while.
Yes, sometimes the healthiest things couple can do is stop analyzing everything for a moment and just recognize themselves in the journey. Because one of the things nobody really prepares for you in marriage is just how actually ordinary marriage is. I don't mean that in that statement in a disappointing way at all. I just mean it that it doesn't always look like what you imagined when you were younger, or even when you first got married. You expect something quite cinematic at times, deeper conversations, and a constant connection, emotional moments that feel very significant. And tell you what, those moments are there, of course, but most of marriage is actually made up of very normal, everyday, box standard life happening in very close proximity.
Exactly. So it's just like real life: cooking, cleaning, schedules, routines, decisions about very ordinary things. And you suddenly realize you're sharing life with someone who has very strong opinions about things you didn't even know people could have strong opinions about. And, there's always at least one thing, like how towels should be folded, or how how things should be put away, and what clean actually means in the kitchen. And what's funny is most of these things don't feel important until you're living with someone who does them differently. And somehow those moments become part of your shared language. At first, they feel like tiny points of tension, nothing major, just small differences in how you approach life. But over time, they become familiar. You start to recognize the patterns and almost anticipate them.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
Now, with those patterns, you either learn to adjust or you learn to laugh. And actually, ideally both, because if you take every small difference seriously, you spend your whole life in negotiation. But at some point, you do realize that this is just how that person is wired, and this is how I am wired. I'm wired differently. And what's interesting is that those differences don't actually go away. You just become part of the texture of life together. You stop seeing them as problems to solve and start recognizing them as part of the person you actually chose to do life with. And I think that's where the humor begins to show up as well, because you start to realize there are certain moments that are almost predictable. Like you already know how a conversation is going to go before it even starts. Just like the classic "we need to talk," or you can tell from a look that the other person is deep in thought and perhaps even what they're thinking about.
And there's a kind of unspoken understanding that develops over time, and it's quite humorous when you think about it, because no one else would necessarily understand those moments, but the two of you just do. And maybe that's part of what makes long-term marriage interesting. It's not just the big shared moments, it's the accumulation of very small, very ordinary moments that only make sense to the two of you. And somehow those are the ones that you remember the most. And I think sometimes we underestimate how important those ordinary moments are, because they don't feel significant at the time. They don't feel like the deep parts of marriage, but actually they are where most of life together is lived, and maybe even where most of the laughter is as well. Not planned laughter, just those moments where something is so familiar or so predictable or so uniquely you two that you can't help but smile at it.
And I think what surprises most people is not the big disagreements in marriage. It's those small things that somehow end up mattering more than you expected. Things you never thought would even be a big thing suddenly become part of everyday life. No one warns you about the fact that people have completely different internal systems for everyday life. like what counts as tidy, which you talked about, what kind of counts as urgent, what counts as done. And you don't discover that in theory. You discover it when you're actually already living together. And it's funny because none of it feels serious on its own. It's just those small moments. But over time, you realize you've had an entire silent conversation about life and how life should be done without actually ever agreeing on it out loud.
And, like we mentioned about the dishwasher situation, that couples, I think every couple they do have that dishwasher situation in quotes. One person is thinking there's a system here, and the other person is thinking it's already clean, so why are we overthinking this? And neither of you is wrong. You're just operating from different philosophies of order. And what's interesting is that at the beginning, you try to correct it. That's at the beginning of your marriage. You think if I just explain this properly, then they'll understand. But eventually, you realize it's not about understanding. It's about preference. You stop trying to win the small things, or at least you should, because otherwise you'd spend your whole life in micro negotiations about things that actually don't matter in the bigger picture.
This word you use, preference. Preference is not standard. And we must never confuse those words. Preference just means that's what I prefer. And the fact that I prefer it doesn't mean it's the standard for everybody. So it is one of the things we have to realize.
And doesn't mean that it's wrong or you are right.
Exactly.
It's not a right or wrong thing.
Preference.
It's just a preference. Yeah.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
And with this preference thing, now I think that's where humor starts to become really important in marriage. You spend your whole life in micro negotiations about things that actually don't matter. Because if you can't laugh at the fact that you've had the same conversation about towels, how towels should be folded for the umpteenth time, then it starts to feel heavier than it actually really is. And what's funny is how quickly you start to recognize these patterns. You don't even need words sometimes. As we've said already, you can just look at each other and already know where the conversation is heading. Yes, that look says, we're about to re-enter an old discussion that we both know the ending of. So let's just keep away from it. Let's just kill it straight away. And over time, you either become frustrated by that or you start to find it quite endearing. The choice is ours because it's familiar, it's predictable, it's part of our shared life rhythm. And maybe that's the real transformation here, when frustration turns into recognition. When frustration turns into recognition. When you stop seeing differences as problems to fix and start seeing them as a part of the person you're actually living life with.
Yeah. One thing also that I think is that, I think something changes after you've been together for a while. You stop needing everything explained all the time. And you start recognizing things before they're even said, not in a mind-reading way, because people always say that, but more like you just know the person. You know their moods, you know their patterns, the way they think, and the little signs that something's off or something's fine. And sometimes it's tiny things like the way they walk into the room or how loudly they put something down or even how quiet they are. You become weirdly observant without trying to be. You can tell the difference between tired quiet, thinking quiet, and something annoyed me, but I haven't said it yet quiet.
I know that very well.
Yeah. And that one especially, and the funny thing also is that early on in marriage, you think understanding someone will come from all the big conversations, but to be honest, a lot of it comes from repetition, just everyday life over and over.
Exactly. And you start picking up patterns naturally, like knowing which version of your spouse you are getting, depending on the time of the day. Morning people and non-morning people should probably disclose that information much earlier. Seriously, because some people wake up ready to discuss life, to discuss purpose, to discuss everything, to discuss the future at 7 in the morning. And some people are just trying to locate themselves spiritually before speaking. Give them a minute. Even things like that become part of how you live together. You just stop taking certain things personally because you understand the person behind that behavior more. And you see it more of the person rather than the behavior. And that change, that change then comes into place, where the spirit of relationship quietly begins to build. Because instead of reacting immediately, sometimes you just think, okay, I know what this is. It's not a big deal. We'll move on from there.
Exactly. Like knowing when your spouse actually wants solutions and when they just want you to listen for a second. That one takes time to learn. And to be true, sometimes you think you're helping and the other person is getting more irritated by the minute. Meanwhile, you feel very useful, very useful, completely unwanted, but useful. And couples also develop their own strange little culture over time. Things that would make no sense to anyone else. They have shared phrases, shared looks, certain stories that somehow become part of the household vocabulary forever. And half the time, you don't even remember where it started. It's just become part of how you speak to each other. And those moments where one person starts telling a story and the other person jumps in halfway because you've told it so many times. Yeah.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakole and Bosade Santos.
Yeah, so in spite of someone jumping in, you try to somehow still laugh at the same part, actually at the same prompt, every time.
All the time.
And that's the part people don't always see from the outside. Marriage isn't only built on big milestones; it's built, on accumulated familiarity and those little nuggets. Familiarity, not in a boring sense, more like in a settled sense, like you've built a shared heartbeat together over time. And to be honest, I think those are the moments that carry people through harder seasons as well. Not grand romantic gestures every day, just knowing each other properly, knowing how to read the room, knowing when to give space, knowing when to bring humor into something instead of making it heavier, and knowing which battles are not worth reopening at 9:30 at night. That's maturity. That's survival.
And it's interesting how some of the things that feel stressful at the time eventually become the stories that you laugh about the most. And usually the story changes before the memory does. And, at the time you're thinking this is a lot, maybe then a few years later you're retelling it over dinner, laughing like it was comedy. And sometimes it's because you realize how very dramatic you both were being, completely convinced this tiny situation represented a major issue.
True.
Meanwhile, now you can barely remember what the actual disagreement was about.
Exactly. You remember the energy, you remember the situation, or one random detail that somehow managed to survive, like maybe someone storming off, but still remembering to take the shopping bags with them, angry but responsible. Or those arguments where halfway through you both realize you're not even discussing the same thing anymore. That happens more than people do admit. One person is discussing the tone, the other is discussing facts, and both of you think you are making perfect sense, but in actual fact, you're not.
You know, there are those memes on YouTube that you see. They talk about angry, but they still care. Where maybe they've had a misunderstanding. The couple, they've had a misunderstanding, and the guy is trying to make Indomie because he's hungry, and the wife just comes, pulls the Indomie packet out of his hand, and hands him a plate of food. Or the woman is trying to reach for something in the cupboard, maybe trying to get a stool to get on it, and the man just comes and just moves her out of the way and brings the thing down. For even though they were having this moment of not talking to each other, but then they were still doing something for each other. And when you look back later on, you're thinking we were exhausted, and that's what it was back then. Tiredness has it has started more unnecessary tension than people realize. Lack of sleep. I was talking to you about us recording this episode. It was a struggle for me, but here we are. We're doing it. And hunger, stress, rushing. Suddenly, somebody is asking, did you lock the door? And it feels strangely personal, because now it doesn't sound like a question, sounds more like an accusation. But meanwhile, it was just a question. But those moments become funny later because time already softens them, and you get enough distance from the pressure of the moment to finally see yourselves properly.
Yes. And I think that's healthy, actually, because couples who can eventually laugh together usually aren't trapped in that moment anymore. And sometimes the stories become part of your relationship history, not because they were perfect moments, but because you survived them together. Every long-term couple has those stories where if you explain them to someone else, I mean, we've got several of those, they probably won't even understand why it's funny. But for the two of you, it instantly begins to bring back memories of whole season of life, certain cars, certain houses, certain trips, even little tiny disasters, especially trips. I remember as our misadventure, I'll call it a misadventure. We traveled to Michigan in the United States, and I was going to go for training in a simulator in Texas. And we were normally flown. And I thought, you know what? Let's
what a good idea.
Let's have a road trip instead.
And we had
catch
kids.
Yes, we'll catch the bus, and we thought, it's going to be. Well, I thought, it's going to be
a good road trip.
You know how you have a road trip and you stop and you just see the whole of the United States, but not realizing that the bus itself was going to drive nonstop. I think it was at 26 hours or so. Yes, the drivers would change, so would stop somewhere, thinking, we'll all get out. And
our youngest son was, he was car sick, and he was throwing up. And
it was a big misadventure. And that's a story we have as a family.
Yeah.
So whenever I use the word misadventure, that whole episode comes to mind.
Yeah, trips actually reveal character, because travel will expose every difference in planning style immediately, just as it was his brilliant idea to have a road trip, but then it just did not end well. And one person has color-coded documents, maybe. Remember those days when we used to A to Z of, oh my goodness.
It was, what was it called? MapQuest?
So
MapQuest, print it out and,
And, the other believes confidence is a travel strategy, and anyhow, you still arrive. And, those are moments that quietly build closeness over time, not because they were polished or ideal, but because they became shared memories.
And those shared memories do something important in marriage. One, they create a sense of history, which And it's good to have history because you always have something to refer to. They also create a sense of we've lived through things together, especially if those things were misadventures. Even the ridiculous things, especially the ridiculous things where you have been stretched, in one way or the other. And I think when couples lose sight of that, marriage can start feeling overtly functional. It's like it's all about the function rather than the journey. It's just schedules, just responsibilities, just logistics. Whereas shared stories bring warmth back into things. They remind you that this isn't just somebody you manage your life with. This is not a co-worker. This is someone you're actually living life with, and there's a big difference.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
Also, one of the strangest things about marriage is realizing that the moment you thought would matter most often aren't the ones you carry most clearly, years later.
True.
And you expect to remember the major milestones, and of course you do. But a lot of the time, it's the smaller things that stay with you, the ordinary days, the random conversations, the moments that didn't seem important at all at that time. But sometimes it's not even the event itself, it's the feeling around it. Sitting somewhere late at night, talking nonsense because you were both too tired to make sense anymore, laughing in the middle of a stressful week, looking at each other during complete chaos and somehow both understanding the moment without needing to explain it.
Yeah, that's right. And, those little moments end up carrying more weight than you realize because they're repeated over years. They become part of the atmosphere of the marriage. And I think that's what people sometimes miss when they imagine love mainly through big gestures or dramatic moments. Real closeness is usually built much more quietly than that. It's built in repetition. It's built in familiarity, which is also part of repetition. In some acts that don't even, look impressive individually, but slowly create trust. They slowly create ease. And of course, history between two people, as we've talked about already.
It's like knowing how the other person would take their coffee, for instance, without asking, knowing when they need space and knowing when humor will help more than advice. Those things, they sound small, but they're actually deeply personal. And over time, they create a sense of safety. Not perfect safety, because marriage is still two imperfect people, but a kind of settled knowing. And I think that's where it's at, that settled knowing, where it's just a feeling of this person knows me and we've done a lot of life together. So they get me and I don't need to explain myself. They don't need to explain themselves, but we just have we have a system going where we respond to each other in the right ways because we've lived together over time.
And I think after a while, love starts looking less like performance and more like presence. And that's good because the longer you're together, the less energy you have for pretending away. Honestly, you stop trying to make everything look polished. Life gets too real for that. There are bills, there's tiredness, there's family pressures, busy weeks, random misunderstandings, unfinished conversations. And somewhere inside all of that, you're still choosing each other every day in very ordinary ways.
You're listening to the Marriage Experience Program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
Father, I said till death do us part, I want to mean it. with all of my heart. Help me to love you more than I love her. Then I know I can love her more than anyone else. And bring her in your presence today. Make her what you want her to be. I pray to hear her heart. I pray she'll love you more. I pray to cherish and serve her, and will bring you glory today. I pray.
Father, I said till death do us part. I want to mean it with all of my heart. Help me to love you more than I love him. Then I know I can love him more than anyone else. And bring him in your presence today. Make him what you want him to be. I pray to hear his heart. I pray he'll love you more. I pray to strengthen and serve him. We'll bring you glory today. I pray.
Lord, help me love her as you love the church, your bride.
Help me submit to him as I submit to you. My life,
I pray to hear her heart. I pray.
he'll love you more.
I pray to cherish and serve her, and will bring you glory today. I pray to hear her heart. I pray she'll love you more. I pray to cherish and serve her, and will bring you glory today. I pray. This is my prayer. Amen.
The marriage
You're listening to the Marriage Experience program with Ayakule and Bosade Santos.
So maybe that's the reminder for this week. Don't underestimate the ordinary parts of your relationship, because most of marriage is lived there, and most love stories are also built there too.
True. And as you move through this week, may you have grace for the changes that come with growth and wisdom to recognize who you are becoming while continuing to grow together with steadiness and with peace.
And as we also always say, keep talking, keep praying, and keep inviting God into the center of it all. And may your relationship be marked by ease, not complacency, and not pressure, because sometimes it's the simplest moments that keep you closest.
So you've been listening to the Marriage Experience program on Hearts on Live Radio, which is Scotland's first Christian radio on DAB Digital.
And we're here live on Mondays with a replay on Wednesdays if you missed us.
And if you're listening to this on a Monday night, don't move. All right, the Lahore is coming up at 11 p.m.
And on Wednesday, we have What's on Your Plate with Annette. And this is a great lifestyle show celebrating everyday heroes in their communities.
And if Heartsong Live blesses you, consider supporting the station at heartsonglive.co.uk/donate.
Also, email us at mexperience@lidiosantos.com. You'll find us on our YouTube channel at Marriage Experience, and we'll just hit the like button and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Also, download the HSL app for easy, up-to-date access to ours as well as other uplifting programs.
So that's today's Marriage Experience. See you next week. Stay encouraged. Remember, God is already there. Do have a blessed week.
Join Ayakule and Bosade again next week on the Marriage Experience program as they bring God's truth to help you build your marriage God's way. Till then, remember, marriage is God's idea and it is a good thing.
The marriage experience all day.